The scene at Buckingham Palace always holds a special charm. The guards, dressed in bright red uniforms and tall black fur hats, stand motionless under the sunlight, becoming an essential symbol of London. On that morning, the lively atmosphere came from tourists eagerly awaiting the changing of the guard ceremony. People from all over the world stood crowded together, laughing, joking, and taking photos, but no one could ignore a particular figure in the crowd. Jagger Weston, a towering American wrestler, was not just an ordinary tourist. His impressive, muscular frame and confident stride made him impossible to miss. Dressed simply in a black shirt with the phrase "No Rules" printed on it, he moved through the crowd as though he was the center of attention. Every step he took seemed to challenge the world around him. The crowd seemed to fall silent at his presence, but soon after, the chatter began to fade as all attention shifted towards Jagger. "Look at this crowd. They're nothing but statues. What are they doing?" Jagger shouted, his voice reverberating through the open space. His taunting words seemed to challenge the entire discipline of the British Royal Guard. His eyes stopped on one of the guards, Henry Blake, who stood firmly like a rock in the middle of the crowd. Henry, a royal guard, did not move an inch. He stood still, his eyes fixed forward, his face showing no emotion. His bright red tunic made him an inseparable part of the ceremony. But when Jagger locked eyes with him in a provocative manner, Henry did not flinch or show any reaction. He knew his duty was to maintain order, no matter what. Jagger felt this only fueled his confidence further. He stepped closer, continuing his barrage of taunts, trying to draw the crowd's attention. Pointing at Henry, he yelled, "This is ridiculous. You're standing there like a robot." No, more like a child's toy. The crowd began to murmur, their curiosity piqued by this confrontation. A few people in the crowd tried to intervene. A woman shouted from behind, "We're not here to watch a circus." But Jagger just laughed and shook his head, continuing to assert his dominance in the space as if he were the only one who mattered. Despite Jagger's ongoing taunts, Henry stood firm, like a symbol of the strict discipline royal guards are known for. His short brown hair remained neatly trimmed, and his black fur hat never wavered. Every step he took, every breath he drew, reflected his patience and respect for his duty. Jagger saw Henry's silence as an even greater challenge. He began to escalate his provocation, seeking a reaction. The crowd, too, started to take notice, as they had never seen a royal guard like Henry, one who remained motionless despite being ridiculed. Some began to express concern. Is he really not going to do anything? Doesn't he feel embarrassed? Someone in the crowd murmured. But Henry, though feeling some anger inside from the insults, kept his silence. He knew that his actions could impact the reputation of the royal guard, and he could not let that happen. It wasn't just about patience. It was about the self-respect and responsibility of a royal guard. He was unwavering. Inside, Henry felt a rush of anger, but the resilience he had trained for since joining the military held him in check. He knew that if he reacted or allowed his emotions to take over, he would not only lose his dignity but also undermine everything he had worked for. His silence was a powerful message to Jagger, a reminder of the strength of discipline. Jagger began to lose his patience. He couldn't stand Henry's silence any longer. A feeling of disdain rose within him, making him lose control. He moved closer, crossing the barrier, and stood directly facing Henry, locking eyes with him as if daring him to react. "Unbelievable. Can you really stand there like that forever?" Jagger continued, his voice dripping with mockery and challenge. "A real soldier wouldn't act like this." The crowd went completely silent. Everyone sensed that something big was about to happen. In the thick tension of the moment, Jagger raised his hand and began mimicking pre-fight movements, swinging his arms forcefully. The sound of his motions echoed, and the air around him seemed to freeze as everyone in the crowd held their breath, waiting for Henry's response. Part of Henry felt that he couldn't remain silent forever. He felt insulted and could no longer tolerate being treated this way by a stranger. Yet, he remained patient, holding his ground, preparing for whatever might come next. Unable to endure any longer, Jagger decided to cross the line. He stepped closer, his eyes glowing with defiance. The crowd began to sense the danger in the situation. With a powerful motion, Jagger lunged at Henry, grabbing him and using all his strength to slam him to the ground. The crowd fell silent, unable to believe what had just happened. Henry's fall echoed loudly, like a crash that shocked everyone around him. Phones were immediately pulled out, recording this terrifying moment. Screams of alarm filled the air. Jagger stood there, breathing heavily, raising his arms as if he had just won a wrestling match. He smiled victoriously, as though he had proven himself to be the stronger man. But what he failed to realize was the reaction of the crowd. Immediately, royal guards arrived on the scene. They quickly surrounded Jagger. People around him began to scream and call the police. It was clear to everyone that this was not just a joke. It was a serious act of violence. Henry, despite his pain, struggled to stand up, clutching his injured left shoulder. He knew he had broken his collarbone, but he refused to let the pain break his resolve as a royal guard. Jagger still didn't understand what was happening. He thought it was all just a joke, never expecting his actions to have such serious consequences. As the police attempted to arrest him, Jagger began to resist. "It was just a joke?" Jagger shouted, trying to explain himself, but no one was listening to him anymore. The crowd started to cheer the police's decision. Despite the pain, Henry felt a sense of pride in performing his duty. He stood strong, not letting the pain deter his commitment to upholding tradition. As the event unfolded, no one in the crowd could forget the shocking moment. The royal guards arrived quickly, surrounding Jagger, who was escorted out under a barrage of harsh criticism from the crowd. Phones continued to capture the incident, and videos were quickly shared across social media. People expressed their outrage over Jagger's actions, but also admiration for Henry, who stood his ground with dignity and discipline even in the face of attack. Although Jagger seemed to still not understand the full gravity of his actions, the price he had to pay went beyond public criticism. He was arrested and faced charges of assaulting a public servant and causing a disturbance. The incident not only tarnished Jagger's personal reputation, but also affected the image of a nation that values tradition and the honor of its servicemen. Jagger was brought to the police station, his face full of anger and confusion. Meanwhile, the witnesses kept talking about Henry's actions. Despite his pain, Henry stood strong, never complaining, even trying to rise and show his determination as a royal guard. In the cell, Jagger sat quietly, his head down, hands stiff, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. He still couldn't understand why his playful actions had led to such a serious outcome. His heart grew heavy as he saw the videos of the incident on social media, the endless stream of criticism pouring in. After weeks of tension, the case went to trial. All eyes were on Jagger as he stood before the judge, looking uncertain and defeated. He was facing not only charges of assaulting a public servant, but also public opposition. Videos from phones had become critical evidence, clearly showing that Jagger had violated the rules and traditions of the country. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Every detail of the incident was laid bare, with testimonies from witnesses and the police being presented. Every word from the lawyers seemed to bind Jagger tighter, making it impossible for him to escape. He couldn't understand why his playful actions had turned everything into such a grave matter. As Jagger stood there, his face gradually wore an expression of exhaustion and regret. He looked over at Henry, who remained silent and calm. Henry sat there, dressed in civilian clothes, his left arm in a sling, yet he showed no sign of weakness. Despite the severe injury, he remained composed, his gaze directed towards Jagger, not with hatred, but with quiet dignity and respect. After hours of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. "Jagger Weston, your actions were not only illegal but also a serious insult to the traditions, history, and honor of the men who protect this nation. You did not just harm one individual, but you damaged the self-respect of an entire nation." The sentence was announced. Jagger was sentenced to 10 months in prison for assaulting a public servant and disturbing the peace. The crowd in the courtroom began clapping in approval, showing their support for the fair judgment. After the trial, the story of Jagger and Henry became more than just a legal matter. It was a profound lesson about respect for tradition, discipline, and dignity. Henry, despite his injury, demonstrated an inner strength that was not immediately visible. He was not just a guard. He was a symbol of resilience, self-respect, and responsibility toward his duty. As for Jagger, he was forced to face the harsh truth that his thoughtless actions had not only caused harm to himself, but had also tarnished the image of an entire nation. He had to pay for his arrogance and disrespect, and the lesson he learned was a painful one about the limits of personal freedom and respect for higher values. With its intense moments and unexpected turns, the story of Jagger and Henry became a topic of discussion not only in the media but also within the global community. It serves as a reminder to all of us that no matter the circumstances, respect and discipline are values that cannot be violated. This incident reminds us that a lack of respect, especially for established traditions and the people who uphold them, can lead to irreversible consequences. If you find this story thought-provoking and would like to share your thoughts, feel free to leave a comment below this video. We'd love to hear your opinions on Jagger's actions and how we can apply the lessons learned from this story to our everyday lives. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any upcoming videos from us. Together, let's spread the message of respect, discipline, and resilience to everyone. Thank you for joining us. We wish you a wonderful day, and don't forget, respect is the key that unlocks the doors to understanding and deeper connections in all relationships. We'll see you again in the next video.